we'll get started with this event now. I don't know how many of you really realize at what an amazing time period we are all right now living in. In November 2022, the world's population turned about 8 billion. And in this year, if you go by the latest facts, India in 23 is going to be the world's most populous country in the world. Now, you may see it either as an opportunity or as a problem, but I am an incorrigible optimist. So I'm going to see it as a fantastic opportunity that is helping us going to look at what kind of ways in which we can really drive our country forward and drive the agriculture, which is the backbone of our country. So with this, to have this kind of conversation, right, today we need to want to look at a very diverse set of panel. And the idea was for us to look at, can we think in first principles? I think the moderator spoke, he also spoke about what first principles means. First principles is to look at the fundamentals and ask ourselves basic questions about what we are attempting to do. So when we are talking about India becoming the most populous country, in the world, then the question comes, in what ways can we transform? And as a lover of literature, one of my favorite poems is, this Jeffrey Saxon's poem of, the various blind men who are trying to grab hold parts of the elephant. Have you heard that poem? There are various people who are all gathered at a market, and they try to grab various parts. And then they say, this must be the head of the elephant. This must be this, that, right? To a large extent, we see that when you turn the pages of the newspaper in this country, you see that agriculture is also largely a blind man trying to grab a various part of the elephant. You see some people who are extremely, looking at agriculture as a way where the farmers are the recipients of subsidies. And so agriculture becomes a development problem. In this development problem, then the question comes, okay, now how do we deliver impact? So we are extremely delighted to have somebody who is going to look at agriculture from the development perspective and also look at in what ways can we really look at development from a first principles basis. I'm extremely delighted to have Ratish Balakrishnan, co-founder and managing partner of Sattva Consulting, who is going to talk about what ways can non-profits can help in looking at reimagining the agricultural value chains. Ratish is also a student from BITS Pilani, and I hear a lot of BITSians are here. So we are going to really have a good conversation with Ratish, and he's been a very dear friend. Please. So today we are all living in a technological age. And if you talk to any technologist, obviously technology is the silver bullet, and technology is the magical pill that could solve a lot of problems. Today we have a very young and an enterprising IIT Kharagpur graduate who's been driving one of the leading initiatives to build a Facebook-like platform for Indian farmers. His platform, Krishify, has grown up to 1 crore users in a matter of span of 3 years. And that's no ordinary achievement for a country like ours, where the amount of digital penetration and various factors have not gone together to map the entire demand curve of Indian agriculture. I'm extremely happy to invite Rajesh Ranjan, founder and CEO of Krishify, to talk about from the technological perspective and address in what ways can we transform agriculture value chain from a technology-driven perspective. Now, today, if you look at in our country, finance has been, the backbone for a lot of our operations and culture. Because in agriculture as a domain, there is often aspect of what is the credit that is required for a farmer to continue the operations. We've had a long history of how financialization has happened in this country. And today, we are very, very delighted to have Emmanuel Murray, who is one of the Bhishma Pitamaha of agricultural finance in this country. Not many people would realize that some of the foundational principles that are involved in setting up FPOs were all drafted by Emmanuel Murray. So we are extremely delighted to have somebody of the legendary stature of Emmanuel Murray, who spent 39 years working in the agricultural finance. He is one of the investment directors at Caspian. He sits in the board of directors of NAPKisan, which is giving funds to a lot of FPOs. So I'm extremely happy to have you, sir. Finally, last but not the least, in India, a country like India, labor productivity is a big problem, right? if you look at the OECD and the Western countries, labor productivity is about 10 times fold, whereas in India it has only reached about 3 times. And there is one person who I think has a best bet to solve that labor productivity problems. That is Sriram Ravi. After working and getting one of the exit in the aquaculture, he is currently working in the farm mechanization space. And I'm extremely delighted to have Sriram Ravi, an engineer from Vijayawada, who has now built an agri-tech platform that goes out to a Dutch global farmer solutions. So if there is someone whom we can learn out how do we grow, build agri-tech from India to the world, we have Sriram here. So thank you, all of you here, for taking the time to do this panel. So in last year, there was a phenomenal discovery that happened that really shook a lot of people who are working in agriculture. For a long time, if you go back and find out what is the history of agriculture, they would say that we were all small bands of people who were all gathered as hunter-gatherers. And then agriculture happened, we started building cities and we started growing. But it turns out that that entire premise is wrong. If you've read the book, The Dawn of Everything, we would realize that there is a new history of agriculture that is currently being written. In that history, it is women who were the inventor of agriculture. And it's the women and the horticulture, the experiments that they did, it's which led to the agriculture that we came in today. So having said that, we tried to have a women panelist, but I'm sure we will really make do with, with what we can talk about from touching into our feminine aspects while we address, while we address a problem which is as great magnitude as agriculture, where 83% of women are employed in agriculture. So to start off with this conversation on transforming from agriculture, value chains from first principles, I want to talk about the very fundamental aspect of in what ways do you think is the fundamental levers, right, in this ecosystem. Today, to a large extent, we are seeing aspects of technology, development, labor and mechanization and credit, right? So I'll start off with maybe with you, Ratish. What is it that one thing that people who work in development understand about agriculture, which agribusiness and agri-tech don't?
Thank you for the question. I just want to quickly check if everybody can hear me well. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? Thank you. Maybe if you look at why agriculture matters so much for development, right? Fundamental principle of everybody who works in development is to make sure that we are able to build resilience towards any shocks and poverty. Right? And you cannot achieve that unless you work with the farmer in making that happen. So the intent of the development perspective to agriculture always starts with the most marginalized, the smallest farmer, and sure that their ability to be resilient to ecological, environmental shocks has to happen. Right? And any solution that has worked at scale from a development point of view has been one that improves the agency and the ability of the person using the solution. One of the things that development brings to the table is this thinking around what does it take to build the agency of the individual or the farmer, right? There is always a topsoil of any market. You look at edtech, you look at health tech, you look at agtech, where there are people who have the ability to use the technology, use the innovation and benefit from it. But beyond the topsoil, there is a large number of people who today don't have the intuitive ability to use that solution. Right? And the role of development is to really increase the share of the topsoil in the market, which is how do you leverage local community trust, which I think businesses underestimate, but development sector understands. How do you leverage long-term games which build the capability of an individual to adopt new technology? How do you build communitization models that bring people together to learn from each other? These are aspects of growth and development that I think the development sector or the impact sector understands better. And usually it is in the foundation of this work that is done, on top of which businesses usually thrive. Right? There was a very important point, I'll just finish this, I know it's a long answer. When Sri K. Prahalad said there is fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, the point that he didn't make is that for that fortune to happen, a lot of development sector work has to happen for it to be taken out for other businesses. Yeah.
No, it's a very interesting point in terms of, you talked about the 6 inches of topsoil, and which is what, brings all of us together. And I really like your point of how communities as a role is fairly deeply understood by the development, which is what I want to bring into Emmanuel here. In our country like India, the whole cooperative movement goes way back, right? Before almost even the British independence, Indian independence. And that rich and checkered history, where we've seen successes in Goa in terms of the cooperatives, or success in Amul, and now we've come to a stage where cooperatives are beginning to wear a corporate face in the name of an FPO, right? We've come a long way in that journey. I really want to touch upon, since you talked about community, I want to touch upon on this aspect that today we are seeing both cooperatives, with what we are seeing in the central government that is trying to bring the cooperatives for organic foods and there. And we are also seeing a lot of efforts on the FPOs thanks to the 10,000 FPO scheme, right? Like you had in one of your reports, you talked about like India having about, over 3,600 FPOs. So what problems that cooperatives are solving that FPOs can't, and what problems can FPOs can solve which cooperatives can't?
I think FPOs by nature are collectives and cooperatives. So they are registered as companies, but in terms of the way they should function is not very different from the cooperative structure. The cooperative structure, unfortunately, has become very rigid and has a three-tier framework in the country, largely primary agricultural credit societies. Again, the name credit limits, the functions of those, and most societies do not do more than just credit. And they have jurisdiction limitations also, and they have a three-tier structure of a district cooperative bank and a state cooperative bank. So all these limit the capabilities of these institutions to function, and also have led to a political capture. In fact, with every change in government, the cooperative elected cooperative board is completely revamped. They're forced to resign, fresh elections conducted. Producer companies basically try to address these issues of the politicization of these institutions. Politicization as such is not bad as long as the government in power does not interfere with these institutions. Producer companies have a national jurisdiction, in fact. They're not limited by geographical presence. They're largely designed towards markets to be able to address the market needs of the farmers, of both inputs and of outputs, and to be able to give them access to the larger market. So these are the functional differences. Where cooperatives operate successfully, there may not be need for, again, a new institution like an FPC, but I think there's no harm. The produce is so large and the number of farmers is so big that we can have both coexisting, and then we can see which is more efficient and which works better. So it isn't really one going to kill the other. They could complement each other. And on efficiencies, I think whichever works better will succeed and the other one will stay behind. So in terms of, let's say, the program of FPCs, the kind of investment that is required and to form these is very minimal. And therefore, it's not a great investment from the state also. And it's worth a try. I don't see these as being competing or eating into each other.
So that brings an interesting point in terms of how do we bring the efficiency, right? Which is where I want to talk to you, Sriram, where today, to a large part of our labor efficiency, which is what I talked about in the introduction, right? Our labor efficiencies have not really improved when compared to the West, right? And obviously, the most common answer is that we are a small holding structure, which limits the impact. So please talk about why is that actually a myth that needs to be debunked? that we can have efficiencies of labor efficiencies despite being a small holding?
Yeah, I primarily feel the mechanization hasn't penetrated to the small farmers uh, because we had bull and we had tractor. We didn't had an intermediary. Say bull has a power of like 5 HP, but we were encouraged to use a 40 HP tractor, which is not really affordable for a farmer. And lot of these tasks in the farm, we don't need a 40 HP power to do that. So that is where I think there is an opportunity like a Tesla kind of a movement where we need to think beyond, like we have taken automotive engines, ICE engines as a standard till Tesla has come in. So now there is an opportunity for players to develop solutions, low power solutions with the involvement of electric in the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, the ecosystem has gone up. So we can use those components in agriculture and create cost-effective solutions. Apart from that, it's also the machine use efficiency is one more factor. Farmer invests like say 20, 30,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees on a tool. He hardly uses it for maybe like 15 to 20 days an year. And for the rest of the 300 days, it's a dead asset for him. So in industries, we talk about machine use efficiency. So there has to be like new models which can come up where how like operation, how we can share these machines. Probably these machines are useful in one taluk during particular season. We can think of transporting all these machines to a different taluk. So the efficiency of machine would be improved and the cost per acre will come down. So these are the things that will come up. And the other thing is education on usage of this new equipment. I give you a small example. In 2016, I purchased a brush cutter for my farm. I taught my worker to use it with shoes. So the next day, what he did was, he tried it himself without tightening the blade, and he didn't put his shoes on it. So that eventually led to an injury of his leg. And till date, from last 6 years, no one in my village is using brush cutter. So there has to be proper training and education on the positives and negatives of using these machines. And so the companies which sell this equipment should take the responsibility of training the farmers. Like you see in the networking world, Cisco has their routers, but they also have a Cisco networking academy where they train people on that. So we need to say initiatives like the Kaktiya Sandbox. Companies can tie up with initiatives like this and help in training of the farmers.
Yeah, so which is a good opportunity for people who are listening in from Kakatiya Sandbox in terms of can we build these machineries where we can experiment which need not come with, with the 5 bhp of, and can fit in the right energy solutions that can be experimented. So to come to Rajesh, see, in his example, he talked about, in what ways the design patterns are changing, right? And I really love the way Krishify has been building up a sort of a learning energies engines which is exclusively designed for Bharat. So as a designer, as a product designer and as a product technologist, what do you think that we don't understand about design from a Bharat perspective, which necessarily people of us who are from India who don't understand?
So, see, there are like multiple perspectives to look at this design problem. So one is I often,
Is he audible? You're able to hear him?
so I often hear people, saying that we are building for Bharat, right, versus building for global. In digital ecosystem perspective, if I ask you top 3 digital platforms that are extensively used by rural audiences, which are those? Probably Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp. None of them are Bharat apps, right? So sometimes what we do as designers, we unnecessarily, make things more complex in our pursuit of simplification, oversimplification. That is not required. But at the same time, yes, why and why those products, those platforms, global platforms are so successful, right? So one thing that I always, focus on is social learning. So in case of Facebook, WhatsApp, YouTube, and platforms of that sort, a lot of social learning has happened because everyone around you is using that platform. And because there is so much of network effect, people are teaching others to kind of, get acquainted with these designs and the platforms. In rural context, in Bharat context, a few learnings that I have seen. Number one, no gimmicky can work for you, right? No gimmicky features to create hook on digital platforms, to make them come again and again. No gimmicky works. They are very straightforward people. They are very simple people. They don't understand digital design language as we do, right? So a platform that simply delivers a core value is going to work, right? Now, as a designer, how simple can you make it? And that's true for any audience, right? Just the difference is that to a more digitally advanced audience, you can serve multiple things on the same platform, but for a simple rural audience, you have to define the core value very clearly, and you just need to deliver that. One, two, three, that's it. In that much of activity or effort, can you deliver the core value? If you are, people are eventually going to learn. And second is how to kind of use that social learning behavior on the platform. So I'll give you an example. I keep receiving a lot of calls from farmers, from our users. So I receive a call, and this farmer is saying that I have seen somebody in my neighborhood selling a buffalo on Krishify app. How do I do it? Right? And then, eventually he has learned from the person who was selling, right? And he himself ended up selling his own livestock, and now he has learned that activity. So because there is a bit of, again, network effect, that people drive discussions, somebody is asking a crop related question, right? Instead of answering his question, other farmers are coming and, asking about how to use this app, how to use the platform. So those who have learned, are kind of teaching others. If and that will also, that social learning will also happen if only you are able to deliver that core value in very simple steps. So I think that's the fundamental of our design.
So, just interesting in terms of what you talk about how Bharat perceives value, right? Because I want to bring this back to now to Ratish, you, right? Today, you have been designing programs both for Bharat and India in some sense, right? And because of the fact that you are working closely more with non-profits, I suppose does it give you more ways to experiment in terms of seeing what works for Bharat? So maybe can you give me some examples from Satwa's work in terms of what has worked well for Bharat and what you thought that might have not worked and
Just to make this a little bit interesting, let me take an example which is non-agriculture, Venki, and then I'll come back to agriculture. I think in the last 3 years, one of the biggest success stories in the Indian market has been the growth of edtech in India, right? Massive companies, world's largest edtech, etc. Imagine the penetration of edtech in India 3, right? It has been very, very poor, and you wonder why, right? Because technology can work anywhere, every child is learning, and why do you need to do it? Shah Rukh Khan is telling you it's good, so it has to be good, right? When we went down to the ground and took the existing edtech products from the market to the rural India, we recognized a whole bunch of things that you don't realize unless you go to Bharat and spend time there. And as he rightly said, they are not complex things, they're simple things. Number one, almost all our edtech apps are in English. And nobody there understands English. Your login page being in English can turn people off, right? Number one. Number two, a large number of rural children are not learning at grade levels. So a grade 5 child is not learning at grade 5. The grade 5 child is actually learning at grade 3. The relative difficulty of a child learning grade 5 is too high, the child stops learning. 3, most Indian parents' greatest consumption of their brain power is how is their child learning, right? Middle class parents don't have many problems. They keep saying, okay, what is my child doing? Is my child learning? Most rural India parents don't have time to figure out how their children are learning because they're figuring out other problems about sending the child to
I
school.
guess we are over-parenting and screwing them
Oh,
more.
totally. As a father, I would agree, right? And so the habit formation of learning does not happen in India 3 as much as it happens in India 1 because a mother does not know whether the child is learning well or not. There is no signal that she can check. So I once went to a village where the mother said, I keep asking him to read loudly because if he's reading loudly, at least I know he's reading because I don't know what he's reading, right? That's an example of how a parent is trying to engage, India 3, right? And lastly, the mobile access is shared, right? So we realized that in a family where there's only one mobile, where the father has mobile, the children learn lesser. When there are two mobiles, the children learn more. Because most of the time, the father is taking the mobile to work, number one, but he's also doing mobile for other entertainment business that he doesn't want his son to know or daughter to know he's using the mobile for. These are all assumptions that we don't make in India 1, right? Now, how do you learn this faster, right? And I can tell you the problem here is that the money that is given to India 1 companies is not to learn all of these things deeply and to grow it, because it's going to be a much longer acquisition time for them. So even when companies know this, they can't build for this, because they'll have to play a 10-year game to do this, right? And that is really where I believe working with people on the ground enables faster learning. Because a non-profit can do this, find out, come back, tell you, etc. So we done this interesting program where we got 25 edtech applications from India and asked the non-profits to select them, which one's relevant for their context. So we flipped the power game, right? Which is not companies looking for non-profits, non-profits looking for companies. None of the non-profits chose the big companies. And so for me, this is part of the learning process that has to be true, because for every Krishify that's succeeding, there are organizations that are not succeeding as much because their learning loops are much longer. Well-intentioned people, learning loops are longer, and honestly, that is where I feel finding a way to get diverse organizations to partner together and making it happen is going to create value, and a lot of Sattva's experience has been in making that happen.
So, finding, that kind of a patterns that, what India 2 and India wants, I want to bring that back to a credit behavior context, right? We've had this long conversations about how women's credit behaviors are very different from male. And you've been in NABARD for so many years, for so many decades. And hello. And so, we've seen how women, when they are given credits from an institutional perspective or from a consumption perspective, their behaviors change. So why don't you share with us these aspects of, when we are designing for credit for Bharat, right? Do we account for the women as the person to whom we are granting the credit, or the men? How do we design that?
I think most assets or the land is owned by men or is in the name of men, and that's why although programs are designed for women or the credit is given in the name of the woman, the lender insists on the man, the husband or the father, to be a co-borrower in these kind of arrangements. And the reverse is not true actually. So if a man goes to borrow, the bank or the lender will not insist on the spouse to be a co-signatory. Now these are aspects I think we have to work to resolve. So microfinance to an extent has attempted to do that. Still I think a long way to go. And with 2 decades of these programs being on the ground, there is enough evidence to establish the difference in credit behavior. But taking those into product structuring and product pricing hasn't really happened. So I think the lending institutions have found women as good clients. They've been repaying well, but the risk pricing that has gone into these products has not been reworked out, taking into account their good credit behavior. So that I think, in my view, will come only by directive. No lending institution is going to voluntarily do this. And therefore, irrespective of what we may feel about a liberalized credit regime, minimal regulation, it is essential that these have to be brought in by direction initially, and only then it will happen. Because we find that microfinance institutions today have become convenient intermediaries for banks. So if a bank can directly lend, it still prefers not to do it and directs people to borrow from an institution, which adds 5 to 10% to the cost of borrowings, which is basically the intermediary's costs of operation and his profits. And these need to be disintermediated, and these can bring down lending costs significantly. It's not going to happen on its own. It needs to be done through interventions by the state, in my view.
No, so the reason why I'm bringing this male and female credit behaviors is one of the fascinating things I'm discovering right now is with agri-tech penetration happening, we are also seeing a significant behavioral changes in which reflects in the gender. Like for instance, coming to what Sriram is working on, there is now studies that talk about how mechanization has reduced women's participation in a lot of agricultural implement activities, right? And there is now clear correlation that is showing up. So which brings what I want to bring it to Sriram, that when we are designing for agricultural mechanization, right? In what ways can we acknowledge the fact that it is actually the women who are often doing a lot of the implements work, right? And I'm sure you have a team of agronomists and people who are also studying this there. So in what ways are you looking at it from a design perspective, keeping in mind that it is actually women who are doing much more agricultural labor work than men?
Yeah, I think India has changed. Say maybe like 30 years ago, women were not driving two-wheelers. So Activa was designed for women, and it's a big hit, right? So similarly, if there are small implements, there is a startup here like Jebu. They have been designing a small tractor. Actually, they showed me a video like a woman is driving the tractor and she's doing the cultivation in a rice farm. I think the ease of use and the we think like probably the women would operate these equipments in a more sensible manner than men. So I think so probably so to scale up these equipment.
Not hurting themselves. I mean, that's what you told in the mail who's happened, right? Who went without the shoes.
So probably that would encourage, say we are known, right, women, they have that attention to detail and they kind of use it in a better manner. And they also know how to generate more income from the machine. So apart from using it gently, they can also figure out how to utilize it in a better way and make it better. And apart from that, the major challenge is it's not the equipment alone, it's how do we use the equipment matters. So when we want to do a spraying in a farm, usually the regular practice is they just run, the tractor has to be run at certain speed, the implement has to be run at certain speed, like maybe at 3 kilometers per hour or 4 kilometers per hour. And so probably women can operate it in a better way. They can go it slowly rather than going fast.
Which is an interesting point to bring Rajesh here, because Rajesh is doing a very interesting work in mapping the entire demand curve of how farmers' behaviors are actually reflecting on the ground based on their online usage, right? So, this question might sound really cheesy, but I'll still put it out. What do Indian men and Indian women, who are users of Krishify, what do they want? What are the behavioral insights that you are seeing from analytics from your Krishify platform that surprised you?
So, see, if you see the way the platform is designed again, if you see Indian farmers, they are very diverse in terms of their economic background, in terms of their sources of income, primary sources of income, cropping pattern, etc., the entire life. So, when we thought about it, like, so what kind of problem these guys face and how can we map the problems first? And then we realized that since there is so much of diversity among these farmers, right, and at different stages they face different types of problems, the problems are very fragmented, right? And that's why we decided to create, and if you see like how these problems are getting solved today, right? So agriculture has always been a community activity, right? most often we see that community is limited by a physical boundary, which generally is a village. That's where we thought let's build a community where we break that geographical barrier and let farmers connect with everyone, right? Not just farmers, but also other important stakeholders of the ecosystem, and let them explore opportunities at every stage of their life cycle. So while they do so, and that's how the platform is designed. So, they can have discussions. You will see farmers asking questions about crop disease, discussing about their agribusiness, issues like dairy, poultry, whatever they are involved with. Machinery asks, input asks, which variety to grow, right? So, and we have created that interesting data layer to understand insights from all these discussions that are happening. And that's the biggest source of data. So what farmers are taking more interest in, right? And with time, we have started seeing some trend around change in that behavior. Like so last year, let's say, during a particular cropping season, the kind of discussions that were happening, have the patterns of those discussions changed this year in this season, right? Are people talking more about some kind of machinery? Are they talking about some other kind of crop protection solution? And that's what we judge, right? And that gives us much deeper insights of what behavior shift is happening, even in terms of cropping pattern, right? We have realized in certain areas, in certain geographies, there is always, a hustle bustle between two crops, like which one to grow, and farmers decide at the very end date, right? If it is raining more, probably they would go with black gram, or if it rained less, probably they would go with mustard. And that's how the decisions are made. So as a platform, we try to figure out, can we understand from their regular chit chat what decisions are they going to make, right? And basis that, can we create that demand graph? What if they are going to grow mustard? Probably their entire need is going to be different, right, in the entire season. And that's where we connect with various agri companies, manufacturers, input folks, to kind of meet the needs with.
So we've done 2 rounds, and we would love to open this up for the audience there who may want to ask any specific questions here. I'm told that there are few other people from Agritech who are also coming here, Ram GB and Sanjay Vidyarthi also. So this is if you would love to ask any questions to the panel, feel free. Yes, please. Yes, Ajit.
Hi. My question is to Emmanuel. So there's this, as you mentioned, there's a lot of push from the government and everyone else into FPOs, FPCs, cooperatives, right? There's subsidies, there is education and so on. Why is this not happening with companies and solo entrepreneurs, right? Why, we've always known that capitalism works best. Why not help companies and solo entrepreneurs in a similar way in agri with subsidies and support?
So his question is, today we talk a lot about subsidies and supporting entrepreneurs for FPOs and all, right? So why not help companies, agri companies with subsidies and support, rather than only supporting FPOs? This is his question.
Yeah, I think if we see agri companies and their profitability, they're already doing business with Indian farmers. And there are hidden subsidies in their business also, in terms of fertilizer or other things. Government already provides incentives to them. Now, the FPO program itself, if you see, the amount that is budgeted is 6,000 crore for 10,000 FPOs, which I think in terms of efficiency is a very, very nominal amount, and actually inadequate to build robust institutions. Now, what is happening again, if you see, interestingly, Reliance Foundation, Walmart, all these guys are indirectly getting into the FPO space, promoting their own FPOs, which are going to be supply chains to their corporates. And therefore, they are benefiting. Even ITC is talking about promoting 7,000 FPOs. So in fact, if you see a little closer, all these corporates are trying to plug into this program and try to build their own supply chains, and therefore benefit from this program. Effectively, the kind of money that is there in this program is too tiny to interest any corporate. It's too insignificant to be of any interest to any corporate. And the responsibilities that come along with it are pretty massive. So really they are benefiting from it without being actually provided the subsidy.
No, but I think his underlying premise of the question, if I get it right, is also a very interesting question for this, right? It says like, why not let market solve these problems and why bring government?
Okay, so the key problem is of aggregation, you know. No corporate, the fertilizer company or the seed company or the Olams of the world are able to directly deal with farmers. So they need an intermediary institution to negotiate with a large number of farmers. And these FPOs seem to be that collective structure whereby they can get as close to the farmers as possible. And that is how it's going to be.
Any more questions?
My question is like when we go for the audit of banks and other things, we see that the farmers are financed in multiple ways. Like some of the local banks, the cooperative banks, the FPOs are also being financed by them, microfinance organizations, a lot of things. So I wanted to know two things. Like, is there any mechanism to find out that they are not doubly financed? And the second point is like, are we not pushing them into a circle of debt by doing this multiple finance? And one suggestion what I meant for the agriculture related organizations is, can't they be treated at par with the commercial organizations? So that if you are giving them some kind of supplements, it is hindering their
What happens with subsidies? Probably if there are policy holders here, I would beg them not to subsidize the farmers, but encourage them to innovate business models. Suppose in a drip irrigation, like maybe 10 years ago, a farmer just need to pay 10,000 rupees and government gives a subsidy of 90,000 rupees. There was a company called Driptech which invented a low-cost drip irrigation system for 18,000 rupees. Okay, but none of the farmers were taking it. Every farmer was going through the subsidy route. So he gets most of the farmers deployed the drip irrigation system. After the guy takes the photos, they used to sell it back for 20,000 rupees. And the intention of the drip irrigation system went into a subsidy route which didn't benefit anyone. So yesterday, as a part of Kakatiya Sandbox, I saw a farm. A sorghum farmer was using drip irrigation. I thought drip irrigation was used only for horticulture farmers. But a sorghum farmer was using drip irrigation system, and I asked him how much it costs. This cost like 22,000 rupees, which the farmer financed himself. So where does this 80,000 rupees go? It just was routed to somewhere else rather than benefiting the farmer. So even the case with like lot of implements are given on subsidies. So there is no point of giving subsidies and the farmer buys the equipment and keeps it. Instead, if farmers buys the equipment with his own cost, he knows how to extract maximum value out of it.
So which is a question I would, a follow-up question I would bring to Ratish here. If subsidies can, kill the technological efficiencies and create so much of havoc in the behaviors, why do companies still prefer a model of philanthropy to solve a lot of these problems?
It's a tricky question. So I'm going to answer it in two different parts, Venki. So first part
I
is...
deliberately put you on the spot, yeah.
Huh?
I deliberately put you on the spot.
I know. So first part is, I think, going back to the two questions that were asked, I think there is a fundamental first principles question, right? Which is, how do we treat a farmer? Are we treating a farmer as a free business agent? Like any person in the market, the farmer should be treated as a person who can transact with companies, with others, or are we treating them as a national asset, which is they're working on public good, on a business that is inherently unsustainable for small farmers, but they have to do what they have to do because we have to eat.
Because we will glamorize them as Annadata and all of that.
Exactly. I think we are stuck somewhere in between. We are not sure whether we should treat them as transactional agents in the market, or we should treat them as national assets and safeguard them. And any conversation about them is largely emotional than financial. And we put all the constraints around them now saying, it's regulated, you can't export, all of that. And I think that's where some of these questions also emerge, because underlying the question is the question of how are we treating this person, right? And that's a question. And related question is, how many farmers does India need? You said to me yesterday that 41% of our population is farmers. Do we need 41% of people to be farmers? Because in developed economies, it's 6%, right? I think unless we answer that question, we will keep looking at some of these symptoms and asking ourselves whether it will work, number one. The second part I want to add is that philanthropy has done a lot of rubbish, right? There are places where philanthropy has no role to play. Also, subsidies have no role to play, where I think it skews the market. We should understand basically that philanthropy addresses market failure or government failure. Right? Where government can't deliver or market can't deliver is where philanthropy has to come. Drip irrigation is a classic example where market could have played and solved the problem. Right? Philanthropy should not have played a role there. Right? Today, honestly, subsidies in fertilizers should not be given. There was a period of time, a window of time, where subsidies in fertilizers is necessary to build a habit. Now it's become a habit and it's become an addiction. We are still subsidizing fertilizers, which is causing many problems for the state. It is the largest subsidy scheme in the country, right? So hence, it's necessary to remember where subsidies are relevant. It's where market failure or state failure happens. Farmer producer organizations are in an initial stage. Some subsidy in the beginning for them to stabilize makes sense, but they have to be time-bound, limited, incentive-based. If you don't do that, it's irresponsible money going to different people. And you have to know when is the due by date by which it ends. So why do companies like it? It makes them lazy. Right? It's free money. It's like skilling ecosystem. Right? So I think there are mistakes there, and I think philanthropy should recognize where it should stop doing things, and state should recognize where it shouldn't meddle with, where the markets are more efficient in solving the problem.
So I'll just add to the context of your question that over a period, the Indian farmer has become 5 times more indebted while his income has just doubled. Now, this is the statistics that is showing. But in the startup ecosystem, there's a kind of hype now that ag fintechs are going to be the future and 80% of Indian farmers are starved of credit. The contradictory statements floating around. And I think the reality is we still need to provide efficient, low-cost, timely credit to Indian farmers. And that is a problem that has not been solved. In my view, the banking system has to be the key driver of this. Agtechs have to provide the technology to deliver it. On their own, neither the banks nor Agtechs are going to solve this problem. And we cannot afford to further burden on an argument that we are substituting informal credit. I think that's a specious argument that is being sold to try and say that a farmer is indifferent to interest cost. It's only availability that is the key factor. These are all myths, unsubstantiated, I think driven by venture capital, which needs to be, I think, seriously addressed. On the farmer indebtedness, we can get formal credit from the CIBIL and other data. What is missing from there is the informal credit and the primary credit cooperative society borrowings, which is, again, I think, not too large, can be captured by declaration, and we can easily do that data. Any good rural branch manager who's operating on the ground has a very good sense of the indebtedness of his farmers. So if you're grounded on the ground, we have very clear data on both credit behavior and indebtedness of farmers.
Yeah.
These are all macro hype that is created.
No, and that is where probably we need more incubators also, right? I want to also plug in the Kakatiya Sandbox in this aspect there, where we need these kind of lab spaces where we can bring down a lot of these costs and make it at an affordable rate that is helpful. So yes, and that is, we have 2 minutes more. Any last questions? Yes, please.
I'm just saying, like, you spoke about how men and women get different sorts of access to credit and how that's a problem. So I'm just wondering, do you see, like, women, just wondering, you talked a bit about how specifically women's issues play a role in all of this and getting credit and how they perform working in agriculture. So I'm just wondering, what work do you see women doing with these issues, and how do you plan to integrate your work with what women specifically are doing in the future?
I use credit and their technologies and all of that. So in what ways can we make sure that we work more with women farmers and address some of their challenges in the ground? Rajesh, you want to take a shot?
So, so again, awareness has a huge role to play in here. How women farmers are making it big, and there are a lot of such, instances where women are actually. So there is a famous woman called Kisan Chachi, based out of Bihar. You might have heard about her. A few years ago, she was awarded Padma Shri. So if you hear her stories, and we have tried to bring her on board on Krishify and do multiple such stories with her, how she actually has created that kind of a name in a profession in that area, at least in Bihar, I can say, which is male dominated, right? So, and it's a social stigma. If a woman goes out in the farms doing labor work herself, that's a social stigma associated with that. But I think these kind of stories, again, social security, when women feel great and women are appreciated enough when they do such things. While we also talk about a lot of benefits given to farmers in general, I think benefits, if we are, since we are already giving benefits, benefits associated specifically to women can, again change the narrative.
Yes. We have one more question. Yes.
Thank you for being candid. And Emmanuel, sir, you just rightly mentioned about VC hype in terms of agri-fintech, right? I just want to add another bomb in terms of topic. One is, what, in your opinion, what exactly is on-ground Bharat market potential like for agri-tech in particular?
For what?
Agri-techs, Bharat potential for agri-techs, because I'm also into VC space. Everyone comes to me and say that we are building for Bharat, and they say as if the market potential is infinite. But in your opinion, what you think is the exact potential in terms of money, rupees?
It's a very difficult number to fix reports stating this. What I could say is agriculture is changing, people are changing. So drudgery in agriculture is something has to be addressed. Resource constraints have to be addressed. Climate change has to be addressed. So all these require appropriate solutions on the ground. Many of those solutions are there on the shelf, and getting them to the farmers is the issue. So the whole key to a successful agri-tech is a farmer-centric solution, that's all. That is which is the missing piece. All these solutions which people show up are there without having the execution capability. Unless we have the ability to take these to farmers at scale at an affordable cost, they're not going to work. So what most agtech says, you pay a price, then you see the benefits. We'll have to reverse that and say, you first reap the benefits, share the profits with us. So that will have to be, but we are seeing a lot of optimism, and it's going to be driven by promoters who are farmer-centric. That's it.